Hi, I'm Michael from Lyric Hi-Fi in Belfast, and you're watching part 2 of a video with Gilad Tiefenbrunn in Belfast telling us about the company and about the products. Part 1, if you missed it, well, just got to rewind and do all that, because part 1 was very interesting. It was about his history and the company's history. It did go on a bit, but we thought we'd leave it all there for you. There's about 12 minutes. This is part 2. Part 2 is more about products. We start on about the LP12, the famous sound deck, and what has been happening to it recently to make it even better again. So, over to Gilad. What we're going to do now is talk a bit about the turntable and all the new bits. And because of what Linn have done with the turntable, it's heresy. Because it's mixed with digital. Horrible. There's digital bits in there. And there's digital control. And all this. And so how can this be? The champion of analog, apart from his app and stuff like that. That was stuff because it's happened for quite a few years, perfectly honest. But there are some in the turntable world who would say it's just heresy at all. It's to be completely analog. However, I don't believe that. Some people do. But there are lots of new things in this. So what I would like you to do is to address about the new bits and also address how come you can live in these both worlds, but it's still analog?
So the clue is in the name of the product. So the full name of the Sonic LP12 is what? Does anybody know?
Sonic LP12.
Transcription turntable. And so what does transcription mean? Its job is to transcribe what is in the groove of that vinyl record. Now that's not relevant. When we say analog, what do people mean? They probably don't even know what they mean. Analog is just used as this catch-all to mean through the recording process, through the pressing of a physical artifact, and then the creation of an analog music signal. But it doesn't dictate what technology is there in between, right? So if the job is to get the information out of the groove of the record, then we will use the relevant and appropriate technology to do that. And so in this case, we have the new Climax Radical motor control unit. There's a bit of digital technology in there. It's monitoring the speed of the motor. It doesn't do much with it. It makes very long-term gradual changes, but it is monitoring. If you look inside the outer platter, you see a little mark there. So there's digital technology in the motor control unit. Inside here, we have a Eureka 2 phono stage. There's digital technology in there. In fact, we digitize the signal from the tone arm right away. And the reason we do that is because we have found out that by digitizing it and running it digital over the wire and then going back to analog here, that is a crucial point of protecting the signal. So in other words, running it digital protects that very delicate signal better than running it on an analog cable does. So we have a digitizing phono stage. It lets us run the RIAA curve, which is that shaped curve that counters the way the record's pressed. It's the way records are designed to be read. We can implement that in the digital domain and get a more accurate result. So for us, it's horses for courses. We're not bound to analog processes at every stage if there are digital processes that do a better job. We are still transcribing from the record, but we're doing it in a more accurate way. So we don't get wedded to particular technologies. In fact, quite the opposite. An engineer, Linn, is constantly scanning the horizon of new technology and asking the question, how can we harness this new technology to solve a problem in the signal path? And solving a problem in the signal path for us almost always means eliminating noise or distortion of one type or another. That's why I say the job of being an engineer is quite easy, because that's all an engineer, and it's quite easy because that's all you have to do. Figure out what next is going to take that noise floor down or remove that problem. So when you go back to the streaming part of it, to me, being able to take the actual recording, because from 1999 most new recordings, or from a recording source that's worth its salt, would be 24-bit. So the problem to solve is how do you get that directly into your system? That's a big problem you solve there. Now with the turntable, my dad's line is don't throw away your records, you haven't heard what's on them yet. That was his line back in the mid-80s when CD came out. And CD was this supposed pure perfect sound forever, which sounds laughable now, right? My dad had the foresight to say, no, it's a temporary format. The quality, it's not capturing all of a recording. It can't be pure perfect sound forever. There must be a better format to come. It's just a holding point as a physical digital format. And he envisaged a universal format, which came later with streaming. We have it now, right? It's a network. Is effectively the universal format because you can put anything over the network. So he was saying, these records have a lot more on them than we've ever heard. And that is built into the whole concept of the LP12. Modular, upgradable, expandable. The idea is, don't be so arrogant to think that your product is perfect. It's the antithesis of that CD thing. It's saying, accept that your product is the best it can be today, but that technology will improve. And if you harness that technology, you can improve the product. He had the foresight also to say, well, if we make the product modular and upgradable, then customers who buy the product can then make an upgrade rather than having to throw the product away. So again, total antithesis to conventional thinking of built-in obsolescence, the complete opposite of that. He hates waste, we hate waste, we hate waste in the signal path, we hate waste in your homes, we hate throwing products away. So make it modular and upgradable, and then gather engineers around who are passionate and looking for that way to improve the product, and then make those upgrades available to customers. And that's how we get to where we are today with the latest upgrades.
Well, let me just indulge myself in a geek fest in the middle of all this, because there's a bit of metal that sits underneath here called a sub-chassis, and on that end sits an arm on the arm board, and on the other side sits this bearing, and it is frankly a piece of metal. And on the cheapest turntable, it's a piece of pressed metal, and then on the next one up, it's got more pressed metal and it's put to the arm board, and then the top bit is a thing called a keel, where this arm board, arm collar, the whole bit is in one piece, and I get all of that, and it's fantastic. I'm really happy. And now you've gone mental by having a keel SE, which is another piece of metal the same size that cost more and sounds better. Now this stuff's just arrived, so I haven't had the chance to sit down and do the keel versus the keel SE. Now I don't think your engineers are stupid. I think it will be better. But can you just tell us why a piece of metal with different little bits and things is actually going to be much better? Just simply, but for the geek in me, it's a piece of metal, for God's sake. What tell me.
Just think, when we launched the keel, which would have been in 2006, and it was the first time we machined it from solid in one piece, the sub-chassis, we had the same questions then. How could it be so important? Why is it making such a difference? And the stiffness of it was key. Connecting the bearing and the tone arm in this way, it's improved the whole suspension system and given that extra stiffness that has allowed it all to work much better. It's eliminated resonance is the key thing. And if you think about the design principle of the LP12, its core design principle is around acoustic isolation. Now you get turntables out there that are designed for minimizing shock impact. If you bump near an LP12, it will skip lazy. It was never designed for that. It was designed so that when you put the needle on the record, at that singular point, there's total silence, so that the needle can read and track the groove correctly. That is the principle of acoustic isolation. As a colleague of mine described it, it's like trying to perform surgery in a hurricane. Okay? The forces at play, what's going on in that groove, and the tiny number of electrons we're actually dealing with. It's a huge engineering challenge, very difficult. So anything we can do to make that point more silent, to improve the acoustic isolation of the turntable, just its fundamental principle, is going to get more information out of the groove. So what the breakthrough is technologically that has allowed this keel SE to occur is computer simulation. So modern computer simulation has taken what was a pretty uniform sub-chassis, and our mechanical engineers have then modelled it and looked at different forms for it. How do you keep the mass roughly the same but improve the stiffness? And crucially, it came up with a completely different form factor. You'll see there's all these, well, the form factor is the same, but within it, there's pockets now.
Yep.
And so the way the metal is, it's not a uniform piece, it's more like honeycomb. And it's not uniform, it's the way that the simulation had told us and worked with us to say, if you make it like this, you'll get far better stiffness for the same mass and the same shapes. And then, but crucially, it's the resonant feature as well, because everything has a resonance, and it turns out that the keel as it exists has a resonant frequency that could interplay, does work within the range of the tone arm. And the new keel IC moves that resonance way out of that range. So that is using a new tool chain that's been able to model the subchassis, allow us to change the design, play with it, change it, and make something that is physically better and has a far better resonant characteristic.
Well done, that's fine. And that's why you hear more. Did you ever hear Melanie Garrett's bobsleigh analogy about how a turntable works? Melanie Garrett worked in an advertising agency in Edinburgh that was writing stuff for Linn, and I was trying to explain to her how a turntable worked and how about this groove pushed this stylus like this, and she said, well, that's just like going down a bobsleigh run. I said, your forces are about 4 tons per square inch, and the other thing is, it's like the bobsleigh is still, the track is moving. The track is pushing this little needle about. The forces are enormous. And you've got to capture how this is moving while the whole thing's turning, while everything's vibrating, while the motor's making all this noise, while all of this is going. This bobsleigh has got to follow precisely what's going on in the bobsleigh run. Do you like that?
That's not bad.
I'll play you another.
Did you use it in the advertising campaign?
No. It was too complicated for that. Sorry. It was too complicated for them to explain. The advertising, if you go back those days, Colin, I know there were balloons of Colin Mars stuff. She thought she needed to know all this in order to design an advert which had a blow-up note and a deflated note for representing music, and it was the perfectly formed balloon in the shape of a note was Linn systems, and the deflated sick one was other hi-fi systems. But anyway, she needed to know about bobsleighs in order to do all of that. Anyway, hi-fi, stuff like that, yes. We're going to go back now, and we're going to go to the next bit. The next bit is some things that are groundbreaking in a DSM-3, and also just the machining of it is beautiful. The Solo 500s are the new part, and again, it depends how geeky you want to be. You can come and have a geek fest with me anytime about ups and down power, paths for cooling. But the big thing is adaptive bias, which is just enormous. And nobody talks about these things. Because most hi-fi companies, they don't actually do anything groundbreaking. And adaptive bias is huge. Absolutely enormous. Also, one of the things about this is that these are beautifully made. And so you think, well, they must have farmed that out to China. But no, there's actually a factory in Glasgow that makes these things.
Hope you enjoyed that. That was part 2. You need to subscribe and push the buttons because there's going to be a part 3. And if you do that, it won't cost you anything, but we'll let you know whenever that comes out. And then you can waste another 10 minutes of your life finding out even more about all the geeky stuff that we love. So press the button, subscribe. Hope you enjoyed part 2. Part 3 will be along soon.